satanic orgies, stories about human sacrifice, just one after the other after the other. Well, the other two guys with me, one of them was mentally handicapped, which you can plainly tell it by looking at him. The other guy looked like he's like 10 years old, maybe. So I was the one that the media chose to focus on because I was the face that fit more with the story that they were wanting to spin and sell than the other two did.
When you are in that situation, it seems like a perfect storm of no matter what you say, as they say when they read you the Miranda rights, will be used against you.
Yeah.
There was no look you could have pulled off.
None.
There was no haircut you could have pulled together, no matter what shirt. If you were wearing black, it was, see, satanic. There it is. And then everything you say sort of gets used against you. And even things your lawyers would say got spun so hard. But there was one thing your lawyer said, that you developed a psychotic euphoria. This is according to a source that I will say later because I'm reading my scribble because I know your time is precious. A psychotic euphoria that caused you to believe you could evolve into a superior entity. Now, why would he say that?
Most people don't understand that half the time we were fighting as hard against the other defense attorneys as we were against the state. The guy who went to trial with me, instead of trying to prove that we were all innocent, his ingenious plan is to try to put this whole case off on me, to try to make it look like I'm guilty so he can say his client just got sucked in because he was associated with me. So at the time, Lori and I, my wife, were still really naive about how the system works. We think they're trying to help us. His attorney tells us, we've got somebody that wants to come in. We want you to talk to him. They're going to write this report up. It's going to be really, really helpful for you. We say, sure, send them in. This woman comes in. She talks to me. The next thing we know, there's this report diagnosing me as having pretty much every mental illness known to mankind, from schizophrenia to being bipolar to hallucinating to being homicidal and suicidal. She couldn't even file the report herself because she had perjured herself in the past, so she got another doctor to sign their name to it. This is not the state filing this. This is one of the other defense teams filing this.
These are your buddies.
Yes, and still to this very day, when people want to say, try to cast some sort of shade on me in some way, to try to say, oh, well, look, here's evidence that he was guilty, that's the number one thing they bring up. And it wasn't even filed by the state. It was filed by the prosecutor. And you know, they don't take into consideration things like, if that stuff were true, why is it not true now? You know, why would I suddenly wake up sane one day? It just doesn't make sense. You know, you don't torture someone for 18 years and suddenly they improve mentally. But they don't have an answer for things like that. They just say, oh, well, he must be guilty because he looks crazy.
The state also puts itself, and we see this a lot with governmental things, the state also puts itself in a position where anything they rectify is sort of an admission of, oh, sorry, we really blew that one. And they just can't do that.
No.
To be accountable is such a disaster on a state level, let alone a federal level. Well, and you're the one caught up in the flotsam and jetsam of all that.
I mean, you have to think also, you know, growing up, when we watch TV shows or read books or see movies, we're always given the impression that these people, these prosecutors, these attorney generals, these judges, that they have these positions because they're moral people, they're good citizens. In reality, they're politicians, just like senators, just like congressmen. Their number one priority is to win that next election.
Right.
So
putting you away.
Exactly.
That's a big ticket item.
Exactly.
Damien Echols has a book, Life After Death. He spent 18 years, 78 days on death row for a crime he did not commit. Got out not too long ago. You probably know him more famously as the West Memphis 3. People like Johnny Depp, Eddie Vedder, lead singer of the Misfits, got together, and a lot of celebrities came to your defense. These were sort of your angels. These guys that you probably were listening to before you went in, now suddenly are listening to you on your way out. How surreal is that, to know that Eddie Vedder and Johnny Depp are trying to get you out of jail when every lawyer that you came across couldn't do it?
It's bizarre, just because, you know, Eddie used to come to the prison to see me while I was on death row. So, you know, you're sitting there, you're talking about baseball, you're eating M&Ms, whatever it is, but in a way it almost seems like it's also a million miles away, because when you leave that visitation room and go back to your cell, you're right back to just trying everything you can to survive until the next day. So you're aware of all these things happening, all these people coming to your aid, on one level, but on another level, it's almost like it doesn't matter on a daily basis because it's not helping you survive. It's not, helping you get through the brutality of the prison guards or whatever it is they're doing to you that day. It's almost like hearing a fairy tale that sounds really nice, but then the next minute you're slapped back to reality, and it doesn't help you at all.
It seems like meeting these people and having these things put in front of you almost made more of a distance from your situation, from the real world, because they got to go back in it.
Exactly, yeah.
You, I said this off mic before we started. You got one of the coolest voices, a very Elvis voice, and I said to you, you are definitely a front man, bro. You are no rhythm guitarist. You are no keyboard guy off to the side. You're a rock star. To meet you is to meet. You have an air about you, an aura of import, and I mean that in the most complimentary fashion. But when you have that air of glamour that you have, it seems that worked in favor of the prosecution. You were a very front-man defendant.
Exactly. That's
and
why
if
they
you
made
were
me
a
the
bassist
ringleader.
or a keyboardist, like your buddies, like Jason and Jesse, they wouldn't have tried to put you on death row. Do you think you were caught up in that trend of accusations? And it was also like that child crime manhunt. It was almost like this cyclical thing, and you got caught up right around the time where these child manhunts. And then as soon as the word satanic, like, ooh, we haven't heard that since Manson. This is good stuff. Look at this guy. He's a front man. Is he in the Cramps? Who is this guy? He looks great. Let's put him away. Are you aware of that when it's happening? Like, are you aware that you're being singled out because of the way you look and the way you carry yourself? Or at any point in the trial, do you think, they must really have a lot of stuff on me?
Well, I think I had gotten used to not fitting in where we came from. That was the whole thing that drew their attention to me in the first place, just because I did not fit in this small town. But when you're going through the trial, it's really hard to explain to someone because most people don't have anything in their frame of reference to compare something like that to. You're so in shock. You're in such a deep state of trauma. You've had your entire world, your entire life completely destroyed, ripped apart. You're just doing anything you can to cope with that. I'm only 18 years old at the time. I'm barely more than a child myself. I was doing anything I could just to get through that situation. So it wasn't... It's almost like it wasn't conscious. It was almost just a survival mechanism.
Was there ever a point during the trial where they presented you with so many facts that you were almost being gaslit, where you thought, well, maybe I did have something to do with it. There's a lot of evidence. Or was it the absence of evidence that almost made it continually laughable throughout? That's what,
and it's also you're outraged because you see what's happening. What you were talking about a while ago, like, for example, they would say, you had to have done it because you wouldn't have had this information if you hadn't. You know this and nobody else knows this. Well, the way stuff like that comes about is the police will say, for example, well, do you think one of the victims could have been mutilated a little more than the others? And you're like, well, okay, sure, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. The next thing you know, when they're telling the story, they didn't ask you that. You just told them that. You just volunteered this information. You didn't just agree with something they said. You're giving them something. You see that, but there's nothing you can do about it. When you're sitting in the courtroom, you can't speak up. You can't defend yourself. You can't say they're lying. You can't do anything but sit there and let them beat you like a piñata.
Did you take the stand in your own defense?
I did, yeah.
And that became a sideshow unto itself.
Oh, absolutely, because nobody is going to believe anything you say anyway. When you go up there, it doesn't matter what you say. They automatically think you're lying because you've been accused of killing 3 people.
3 boys in Arkansas. They were 8 years old. They were found in, I guess, a body of water, a bit of a muddy ditch, hog-tied. None of your guys' DNA was on the scene.
Right.
There was DNA on the scene, as we said earlier, not inconsistent with that of John Mark Byers, who also...
Terry Hobbs.
Terry Hobbs.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I got so many notes in front of me. I had to cram for this. For Terry Hobbs.
Yes.
So you have Terry Hobbs. You have John. Thank you very much for saving me on that and not making me look like a complete asshole. So you have Terry Hobbs and John Mark Byers. You have viable guys out there that could be your defendants. It almost seems impossible to not want to, like, the second round of this, the second wave of this is, let's go get the guy or guys that actually did murder these children. It's almost a backdoor outrage that you must have, because at the end of the day, you're a kind, compassionate guy. I've known you a very short amount of time. I've met your wife and your friend. You're all nice people. You're a human being. You've seen the depravity of the human condition on death row. At the end of the day, you know that 3 8-year-old boys were murdered and their murderer is walking around.
Yeah.
So how do you keep from just going, let's go after that guy?
There's nothing you can do about it. You know, just to clarify, right now, this guy that they refused to arrest, refused to even interrogate, they found his DNA at the crime scene, and they also found the DNA of the man who was providing him with an alibi. He always said he never even saw the victims that day.
It was Terry
Hobbs, and the other guy is named Jacoby. We've had 3 eyewitnesses come forth and say they saw him with all 3 of the victims within an hour of the time they were murdered. We've had people come forward now and say his own family members are telling them that he did this. The prosecutor will not even call a grand jury to question this guy, because if they do, it means they have to admit they screwed up in our case, and once again they're open to a lawsuit.
Sorry to interrupt you, but going back to what you said, Damien, about it's all about getting elected, it's all about saving face. What better way to get elected than to catch the actual killers of 3 8-year-old boys?
Well, they have to admit they made a mistake first, which is the part they don't want to have to do.
So it's almost like a lineage of don't break the code in the state of Arkansas. Even though you're 18 years down the line prosecutor, different from the other prosecutor, don't screw this up for all of us. Like the secret handshake almost.
That prosecutor just got finished running for Congress. The judge ran for Senate and was elected. The attorney general is running for governor.
Oh, terrific.
One of the other prosecutors ran for a seat on the Arkansas Supreme Court. You know, none of them are going to come forward and admit what they've done.
We wish them real well. Damien Echols, Life After Death, and don't forget the West of Memphis documentary with Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson, I believe, is from New Zealand. How do you get hooked up with Peter Jackson and from Memphis and Arkansas?
He contacted Lori one day while she was at work. He sent her a donation to the defense fund. You know, we didn't even have enough money to pay for the DNA testing. He sends a donation to the defense fund and says, if there's anything we can do to help from down here in New Zealand, please don't hesitate to contact us. So she contacted them. Eventually, they became part of our legal team. Peter Jackson and his partner, Fran Walsh. I mean, they were working on this case every single day. While they were making King Kong, while they're making The Hobbit, they come home at night and work on this case. I mean, they were part of every single legal decision we were making. When all the new DNA evidence started coming in, when the eyewitnesses started coming forward, the judge who sentenced me to death said, doesn't matter. I'm not going to hear this. This case is closed. Peter Jackson says, well, if he refuses to let this evidence be heard, let's get it out there in the only way we can, which is by making a documentary and showing this to the rest of the world, showing what this guy's trying to cover up.
It's almost like the state of Arkansas really, not almost. I mean, we know the state of Arkansas got off the hook with their own handlings of the situation. But when you get that star power, and Peter Jackson's a guy, there's no bottom to his pockets. He's a guy that can outlast the state government of Arkansas if this thing goes 40 years. So it's almost like the state of Arkansas, it'd be better now to fall on the sword now than let this documentary and everything make its way around the circuit, get nominated for an Oscar, which we all hope, knock wood. I don't want to jinx anything, but it's going to be a great documentary. Paradise Lost, 1 through 3. Everyone came away from that going, wait, what? How are these guys? You passed your polygraph tests. Your DNA was not at the scene. Basically, you were a goth guy that didn't fit in, that they decided they were going to build this case around. Other guys' DNA were at the crime scene, but that was not inconsistent. See how the language starts shifting? This DNA is not inconsistent with that of the other guy. The state of Arkansas, I don't think this is behind them, or nor should it be.
No.
This is only going to get worse. More egg on their face, I would say.
But it's like they stick to their guns and deny. That's their number one course of action. There was a guy that ran for president a few years ago from Arkansas. He was the governor, a guy by the name of Huckabee. Well, when he's the governor of Arkansas and the Paradise Lost movies come out, people start contacting him saying, why aren't you doing something? This is happening in your state. His response was, those aren't real documentaries.
Yeah.
They're just movies.
The great Doug Benson line. Yeah. I like documentaries except for all the lies. What your faith you've been very forward